The storm began before sunrise, and by the time the first light touched the wheat, the whole valley was already whispering her name, Dangerous Alien Bride. That was what they called her, in kitchens, in barns, behind closed doors, and even in prayer. They said she brought the blue lightning. They said the sky changed when she arrived. They said the crops bent away from her feet. They said no good thing ever came wrapped in beauty that strange. But Elias Rowan, the one man in the valley who still worked his fields with his own hands, stood in the golden wheat and held her hand anyway. He did not look at the people watching from behind them. He did not look at the barn, or the windmill, or the church road, or the black funnel of clouds turning slowly above the hills. He looked only at her face, calm and pale and shining with those soft violet marks beneath her skin. And he said in a low voice, "Stay behind me if they move." Her purple eyes lifted to his, and for a moment, the roar of the sky seemed to dim. "I did not come to hide behind you, Elias," she said, "but I will stand with you." That was the first thing the village hated about her. Not her skin, not her eyes, not the light in her veins. It was the way she spoke with no fear, and the way he listened like her voice mattered. 3 nights earlier, she had fallen out of the storm. Elias had been fixing a broken fence on the north field when the wind turned cold so fast it burned his lungs. The wheat flattened in a ring. The cattle screamed, and the sky split open with a sound like metal tearing. He looked up and saw a streak of white-blue fire falling across the clouds. Too slow for lightning, too fast for any bird. It crashed beyond the creek near the old stone ridge, and the ground shook hard enough to knock into one knee. Any other man would have run back to the house, locked the door, and waited for dawn. Elias grabbed a lantern and ran straight into the dark. He found her in a crater of blackened earth and steaming rock, half covered in silver shards that looked like broken glass and living crystal at the same time. She was breathing, but barely, her dress torn, her skin glowing in cracks of violet light around her neck and arms. For one terrible second he thought she was made of lightning itself, and he nearly dropped the lantern. Then she opened her eyes, looked right at him, and whispered one word in a voice full of pain. "Please, no curse, no threat, no command, just please." He carried her home through rain so hard it cut his face. He set her on his bed, wrapped the wounds on her arms, and sat awake all night with his old hunting rifle across his knees while the house hummed faintly with the strange blue glow leaking through the cloth bandages. At dawn, when she finally spoke clearly, she told him her name was Lyra, not where she came from, not what she was, not why the sky had broken open to throw her into a wheat field, just her name. By noon, half the valley knew there was a strange woman in Elias Rowan's house. By sunset, they had already made her a monster. Pastor Halle came first, with 2 elders and a smile too stiff to be kind. Sheriff Danner came next with questions in his mouth and suspicion in his eyes. Then came the wives, pretending to bring bread and broth while they stared at Lyra as if beauty itself were proof of evil. She sat at Elias' table, hands folded, bandages fresh, saying little. Every time she lifted a cup or turned her head, the crystal lines on her skin shimmered, and every person in that room flinched as if she had pulled a knife. "What is she?" Danner finally asked, looking at Elias instead of her. She answered before Elias could speak. "I am a traveler, and I am hurt." Pastor Halle gave a thin laugh. "Traveler from where?" "The storm." Her eyes went to the window, where the clouds still coiled in the distance. The air changed. Fear found a shape, and once fear gets a shape, people feed it. The next day, children were called indoors whenever Lyra walked outside. Men stopped talking when Elias passed. Women made the sign of blessing over doorframes. Someone painted one word on Elias' barn in red mud before sunrise. "Curse." Elias scrubbed it off without saying a word, but his jaw stayed locked all morning. Lyra came out carrying a bucket of water and stood beside him. "I should leave," she said. He kept scrubbing. "No." The tiredness in her face, the strength she was trying to hide, worse than what? Being alone, losing. A few customers, hearing fools talk. I have survived harder seasons than gossip. A small smile touched her mouth. You are stubborn, Elias Rowan, he snorted. My father called it farming. That made her laugh for the first time. A soft sound, bright and surprised, and Elias felt something shift inside his chest that scared him more than the storm had. She healed quickly after that, but the sky did not. Every evening the clouds gathered over the valley, not normal storm clouds, but spiraling towers threaded with blue-white light, silent at first, then humming after dark. Livestock refused to sleep, dogs growled at empty corners, and the wheat nearest the creek began to pale as if drained from below. People said it was her, of course. They said the earth was rejecting her. They said Elias had invited judgment into their fields. Then old Mirabelle lost her youngest son. The boy vanished while chasing the calf near the northern ridge, just before dusk. Men searched with lanterns until midnight, calling his name into the wind. They found only scorched grass and strange marks in the dirt like circles burned from the inside out. By morning, the valley was no longer whispering, it was shouting. They gathered outside Elias' farm with ropes, rifles, and fear dressed up as righteousness. Sheriff Danner stood in front, pale and sweating, trying to look in control. Pastor Halle stood beside him, Bible in hand, eyes bright with certainty. Bring her out, Halle shouted, and no one gets hurt. Lyra stepped onto the porch before Elias could stop her. She wore one of his old work shirts over her silver dress, sleeves rolled, hair loose in the wind, and those glowing lines along her throat were brighter than before, pulsing with the storm above. The crowd gasped as if the sky itself had answered. Elias moved in front of her, rifle lowered but ready. Nobody touches her, he said. A woman from the back cried out, What about Mira's boy? What about the dead calves? What about the wheat turning white? How many signs do you need, Elias? He looked over the crowd he had known his whole life, men he had harvested beside, women who had brought soup to his mother when she was dying, boys he had taught to mend a gate, and he saw what fear had done to them. It had made them strangers. Lyra stepped beside him, not behind him. I did not take your child, she said. And the air seemed to vibrate around the words. But what is coming for me may take all of you if I do not stop it. The crowd erupted, shouting, cursing, praying, stared up at the vortex cloud turning above the valley, and for the first time Elias saw real fear in her face. I cannot stop it alone, she said. People laughed bitterly at that. But Elias heard the truth in her voice. He turned to her. What is it? She looked at him, and when she answered, the whole world seemed to narrow to her words. I am not the storm, Elias. I am running from those who ride inside it. My people call them harvesters. They drain living worlds, field by field, river by river, sky by sky. I escaped with one thing they need, and they followed me here. The white wheat, the vanished child, the marks on the ridge, those are probes, not attacks. They are measuring your world before they open the gate fully. The crowd went quiet in the wrong way, the way people go quiet when a story is too terrible to accept. Pastor Halle raised his Bible and spat the words, lies from a serpent wearing a woman's face. Lyra flinched, just once, and Elias felt heat flood his chest. Enough, heads turned, and even the wind seemed to pause. He pointed to the northern ridge, to the pale wheat, to the sky churning blue above them. You think I do not know what a lie looks like? I have seen men lie for land, for money, for pride. We would already be dead. Danner swallowed hard. And for the first time his voice sounded like a man, not a badge. Then tell us what to do. Lyra looked at Elias, then at the crowd, and spoke with cold clarity. At sunset they will anchor a gate at the ridge where I fell. Once it stabilizes, the storm will not stay in the sky, it will come down. Your machines will die first, then your water, then your nervous systems. Children and the elderly will fail first. If you run, it will follow the heat of your bodies across the valley. If you fight with bullets, you will only anger it. Someone whispered, Then we are already dead. Lyra shook her head. Not if we break the anchor before the gate opens. She reached into the collar of the workshirt and drew out a shard hanging on a leather cord. One of the silver crystal pieces Elias had found in the crater. It glowed bright enough to light the porch boards. This is a phase key, she said. They need its signal to lock the gate to this world. I stole it. That is why they pursued me. If I overload it inside the anchor field, it will collapse the gate and blind their storm for years. Danner stared. And how exactly do we do that? Lyra's eyes moved to the ridge, then to the old windmill near Elias' barn, then to the irrigation channels cutting through the fields like veins. We use what this world already has, she said. The valley people looked confused, but Elias saw it before. She finished. Water lines, metal blades, grounding posts. Lightning path. He turned to her. The windmill tower is iron cord, old but solid. I can run cable from the pump line to the ridgestones, flood the lower field, make a grounding net. Her face lit with fierce relief. Yes, the anchor feeds on differential charge. If we give it a stronger discharge path, it will pull down then. I carry the key into the center and break it. No, Elias said instantly. Too fast, too hard. No, you are not going alone. She met his stare. You cannot survive the field pulse. He stepped closer, voice low. Stubborn and steady, then tell me how to survive it. Because if this thing is in my field, I am in the fight. For one heartbeat, the storm flashed and the golden wheat bowed around them. And the whole valley watched something impossible happen. The so-called dangerous alien bride looked at the farmer they mocked, and all the fear in her face turned into trust. Fine, she said, but you do exactly as I say. Exactly. What followed was the strangest afternoon the valley had ever seen. The same men who came with ropes now carried cable spools and fence wire. Women filled barrels and drove wagons through the wheat. Teenagers hammered iron stakes into muddy rows while Elias shouted instructions over the wind. Sheriff Danner ran. Messages on horseback. Coat flying behind him. Even Pastor Hawley, after standing frozen for an hour, finally took off his jacket and helped drag the old copper pump lines toward the ridge with trembling hands. Fear had not vanished, but it had been given work, and work can save people from panic. Lyra moved among them like a line of light, touching wire joints, adjusting angles, placing crystal fragments in the soil in a pattern no one understood. Where she stepped, the humming in the air sharpened, and the storm above the ridge tightened into a spinning column, blue lightning lacing its center. The missing boy was found just before sunset, unconscious but alive, inside a ring of scorched grass near the creek, pulse weak, skin cold, eyes flickering under his lids as if he were dreaming someone else's nightmare. Mirabelle carried him home weeping, and when she passed Lyra she stopped, looked at her for a long second, then whispered, "Thank you," though no one knew yet whether thanks were owed. Elias climbed the windmill tower as the sun bled red across the hills, hands slick with sweat and rust, hammer between his teeth, coil line over his shoulder. Below him the valley glowed gold and copper, and beyond the fields the storm turned black-blue like a wound in the sky. Lyra stood at the ridge with the phase key in both hands, her white silver dress shimmering under Elias' old shirt. Hair whipping wild in the wind, she looked small from that height, and somehow more dangerous than any weapon he had ever seen. Not dangerous like evil, dangerous like fire, like truth, like the cost of survival. He reached the top platform and drove the final clamp into place. The old blades groaned, turned once in the wind, and the whole grounding net answered with a deep metallic hum through the field. Lyra's voice rose from below, clear even through thunder. Elias now. He pulled the lever on the emergency pump line, and water burst through the channels in a rushing silver sheet, flooding the lower wheat rows exactly where she had marked them. At the same moment lightning struck the ridge. Not once but 6 times in a blinding chain, and the anchor appeared. It was not a machine the way humans build machines. It was a floating ring of fractured light and black geometry. half visible, half impossible, spinning over the scorched crater. Where Lyra had fallen, the air around it screamed, and shapes moved inside the storm behind it, tall and thin and wrong. Like shadows wearing armor made of electricity. The crowd broke and ran back screaming, but Danner held the line near the barn, shouting for them to stay low, stay down, stay clear of the flooded rows. Lyra stepped forward alone, phase key burning. In her hands, the crystal marks on her skin blazing violet white. The harvesters pressed against the forming gate, and one voice came through the storm. Metallic and layered, not sound but pressure in the skull. Return the key, defect vessel. This world is marked. Lyra did not stop walking. Elias watched from the tower, heart pounding so hard his vision shook. He saw the anchor drawing charge from. The sky saw the flooded channels beginning to spark, saw the copper lines strain under more power than they were built to carry. Lyra shouted without turning, grounding in 10 seconds. When it hits, do not touch metal. Jump clear. He wrapped the final cable around the tower brace and screamed back. Lyra, she looked up, just once, and in that single glance he saw everything she had not said, that she had expected to die the night she fell, that she had not expected kindness from anyone here, that she had not meant to love this rough-handed human with soil under his nails and grief in his eyes, that she loved him anyway. Then the storm struck. Lightning hammered the windmill, the ridge stakes, the flooded channels. Every line they had laid across the valley, the ground erupted in blue-white veins, racing through the wheat exactly as Lyra planned, converging on the anchor in a blinding net of charge. The ring screamed and dipped lower, unstable, pulling toward the earth. Elias jumped from the platform to the hay cart below a split second, before the tower exploded in sparks behind him, crashing sideways into the field. He hit hard, rolled, lost his breath, and came up in mud and burning straw just in time to see Lyra run straight into the center of the light. No one moved, no one breathed. She lifted the phase key above her head and screamed a word in a language that sounded like glass and thunder. The crystal shattered. For one frozen heartbeat, the whole valley became white. Then the anchor collapsed inward with a sound like the sky swallowing itself. The vortex cloud twisted, buckled, and ripped open, pulling the shadow shapes backward into a shrinking wound of blue fire. A shockwave hit the wheat and flattened half the field in a perfect ring, shattered barn windows, threw men and women to the ground, and blew Pastor Holly's Bible clean out of his hands. When the light finally died, the storm was gone, not faded. Gone. The sky above the valley was darkening into ordinary evening, pink at the edges, quiet except for crackling wires and people sobbing in shock. Elias staggered to his feet and ran to the ridge, ignoring the pain in his side, ignoring Danner shouting at him to stop, ignoring everything except the crater and the smoke, and the terrible possibility of silence. He found Lyra on her knees in the mud, breathing hard, both hands burned, the glowing lines on her skin dim and flickering, but alive. He dropped beside her and caught her before she fell forward. Her head rested against his chest, and he could feel how weak she was, how cold, how close she had come to vanishing. Did it work? She whispered. He laughed and cried at the same time, because there are moments when the body does not know which, grief or joy, to choose. He looked up at the clean sky, at the stars beginning to appear where the vortex had been, and pressed his forehead to hers. "You saved us," he said. She gave the faintest smile. "We saved us, farmer." By dawn, the valley had a new story. Not everyone changed at once, because people rarely do. Some still looked at Lyra with fear. Some crossed the road to avoid Elias' farm. Some refused to speak of what they had seen, because it shook the walls of everything they believed. But the wheat in the lower fields stopped paling. The cattle slept. The boy Mirabelle found at the creek woke and remembered only blue lights and a woman's voice telling him to stay still until the bad sky passed. The pumps worked again. The clouds were only clouds. And when the first real rain came a week later, gentle and silver in the morning light. No one called it a curse. They came to Elia's farm in ones and twos at first, bringing nails, bread, lumber, seed. Apologies wrapped in awkward silence. Danner brought new window glass. Mirabelle brought soup and cried when Lyra thanked her. Even Pastor Halle came at sunset, hat in both hands, and stood on the porch for a long time before he said, "I was wrong." Lyra studied him, then nodded once, and that was all. As for the name they once used like a warning, it changed too, though. Some old tongue still stumbled over it. Dangerous Alien Bride became, over time, the bride who faced the storm, then the woman of the blue field, then simply Lyra, and the man they had mocked for choosing her, the farmer with the weathered hands and the stubborn heart, became the reason children in the valley grew up hearing a different kind of story. Not a story about fear winning, not a story about strangers destroying what they touch, but a story about the day a world was almost harvested, and a human farmer looked at the unknown and chose trust. Years later, when travelers crossed the valley road and asked why the wheat near the northern ridge sometimes shimmered violet at sunset, the old people would smile and point toward Elia's farm, where a rebuilt windmill turned slow and steady above the fields. If Elias was in the yard, he would just tip his hat and say the land remembers. If Lyra was there, standing beside him with her luminous markings faint in the evening light and her hand in his, she would look up at the calm sky as if listening for very distant thunder, then look back at the golden valley they had saved together, and her expression would soften into that same serene strength that once frightened them all, and every person who saw them knew the truth, whether they admitted it out loud or not. The most dangerous thing that ever came to their world was not the alien bride, it was fear. And the thing that saved them was a farmer who refused to let fear make his choices. That was the story the valley kept. That was the story the children asked to hear again. That was the story people told when storms gathered and someone whispered that the sky looked wrong. They would say, "Let it come. We remember who stood in the wheat. We remember who held the line. We remember the bride they feared. We remember the man they mocked. We remember how they saved our world."